Hey guys, Mattox here from Keymaster Games. I'm excited to talk to Henry Audubon, who's the designer behind Space Park, and give y'all a little bit of a behind-the-scenes chat of where Henry's from, how he became a game designer, his interest in just game design and all that good stuff, and then a little bit behind the inspiration of Space Park. So, Henry, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here, Mattox. Let's get started.
Yeah, let's jump in. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first? Where are you from? Where'd you go to school? Did you study game design in school, or is it just something you came along with? Why don't you tell us a little bit of background?
Sure. Well, I was born in Ohio, and then when I was about 5 years old, I moved to Burlington, Vermont, which is really where I grew up. Went all through the public school system there. And then when it was time to go to college, I went to Kent State University, so back to Ohio.
Yep.
And while I was there, I studied philosophy and mathematics.
Growing up around there, did you go to any of the board gaming conferences like Origins or Gen Con or any of that stuff?
No, I didn't. I spent a lot of time, though, I'll tell you. There was a hobby store in Burlington called Quarterstaff Games that I spent just, uncountable hours at. And they were really, there was a nurturing environment for me as a young gamer.
That's awesome, man.
So, I studied philosophy and math in college, and I didn't study game design.
Great starts for game design, I'd say. Although it might not have been apparent at that time, I feel like just the philosophy or trying to convey concepts and themes and diving into someone's mind and math being the mechanics portion of it sounds like a pretty solid foundation.
Yeah, well, in retrospect, it's the perfect combo for game design, in my opinion. As you say, I mean, the mathematical aspects of games are pretty well known to people. I mean, games are kind of mechanical systems in many ways, and you're putting players in a certain possibility space and then allowing them to choose strategies and make decisions about what actions they take. And that is pretty well formalized through mathematics. And then in terms of philosophy, it's like, just having a clear way to break down concepts and get into the nitty-gritty analysis kind of stuff. It's super useful, and also just in terms of clearing out your head and helping you think more clearly in general. I mean, philosophy is a great background for that kind of thing. So just to answer your question and come full circle, I mean, really, I didn't study game design explicitly, but I think, the combo was right. And I really see where I'm at now doing board game design and just being somebody who thinks about games in general is being a real convergence of so many different things in my life that are kind of coming together now. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I'm a huge fan of mathematics because my name is Mattox, and so it's in my name to love it. I'm just kidding. Mathematics, bad joke, number one. All right.
No, it's a good joke.
Yeah, man. So mathematics, philosophy, you kind of had this background. So you just had a big post on Reddit come out, which was last week, where you were saying, I dropped out of grad school 5 years ago and dove full-time into game design. And that right. Sounds like a pretty huge decision there. So you had this background going on, went to grad school, and then said, you know what, I think game design is something that I want to pour my life into. Could you tell us a little bit about what happened there, what you were thinking through, and what kind of like sparked that fire for game design to be that full-time passion for you?
Right, sure. Well, when I was deciding to go to grad school in math, I knew that there were certain pockets of math that I was really passionate about. And I think it's no coincidence that there are areas of math that have a close relationship with games, things like graph theory and logic. Anyways, long story short, when I got into the program and I had done it for a year, I found myself surrounded by people who were really passionate about mathematics in a broader way than I was. There were certain aspects of it that I loved, but these people were truly dedicated and they were pursuing something that they were deeply passionate about. And for me, that caused me to reflect and just think about what it is in my life that I'm really passionate about. And the common thread throughout my entire life has been games. I played a lot of games growing up, and certain game activities, mainly, building magic card decks and tinkering with magic cards, and also being a game master, dungeon master kind of guy for tabletop role-playing games.
Yep.
Those were both like proto game design activities for me. get me thinking
Yeah, I
about.
mean, like with Magic, it's almost like you're building your rule set for the game that you want to play, which is really cool. It allows people to kind of jump in as that new to game design kind of idea there.
Definitely, you got to, when you weren't playing the game, you got to experiment with, you still got to explore the possibility space of the Magic cards by uh,
Exactly. And I know some people, I mean, you might have been this way, but you enjoy the making of your deck more than actually playing it out sometimes. I know that some people, and that's like a good idea of like, oh man, maybe game design is the right trajectory for me in that.
Yeah, no, I would say that is true for me. And in fact, I had a really large collection of Magic cards, partially because I was hanging out so much at the aforementioned quarterstaff games that, I just ended up accumulating a lot of cards. Often I would be introducing my friends to Magic, and that would involve me making a deck for them and also making a deck for me. And that would be like our introductory game. And when you think about that task, you're really doing some interesting balance work of like trying to find a suitable matchup amongst two decks, also keeping in mind the limitations of a new player who's learning the rules and really thinking about cognitive load and how can I make this an interesting experience for them without it being overwhelming. And so anyways, there's a lot of these kind of proto game design stuff that goes on with tinkering with Magic decks. So that's been a big influence on me. But just skipping ahead, though, to the grad school situation, it was really, and I think people have likely found themselves in this situation, maybe not in grad school or maybe not having to do with game design, but where you're just clearly surrounded by people who are more passionate about what, you're all up to than you are. And sometimes that can trigger a kind of a course correction in life, and it certainly did for me. So
That's awesome, man. Well, that's cool that you got to figure out, hey, I do love this thing about this, but it's a very nuanced thing, and I don't want to study the broader aspects of it. And so you dove headfirst in the game design. It's been 5 years since that happened. How many games would you say you've designed since that time?
well, if you see over my shoulder, there's a door that leads to my closet. And I think, like many game designers, I've kind of got a closet full of broken games.
Yeah, it's a process.
So, in terms of how, it's hard to estimate how many games because honestly, I sketch out a lot of very simple ideas just in the morning, when I wake up and I'm drinking some kind of caffeinated beverage, green tea or coffee, and I just sketch. And sometimes what I'll come up with is, a little game, you could say. So,
Yep.
it kind of just, we almost need to start up a philosophy seminar on what is a game in order to answer the question of how many there are living in my closet. But needless to say, I've made a lot of little projects, and many of them are busted and need some love. But there's quite a few.
Yeah, well, Space Park wise, when we got to see it, Keymaster is publishing this game by Henry. It didn't feel too busted to me. It felt pretty interesting because there's a really unique mechanism going on there. So in Space Park, you have these 3 rockets that are rotating around the board clockwise. So when you take an action, the rocket moves to the next open location. And it felt like this really nice mix of mechanics that, worker placement, that's a, big term for people where you're choosing an action and placing a worker there. This is kind of like that in the sense that like you have 3 actions available to you that you're going to choose to do. But the unique part of it is that rondelle is the big word there, mechanism, where when you select something, it's moving to the next open location clockwise. And so can you tell us a little bit behind Space Park, which is a game that is currently on Kickstarter, and tell us the design inspiration behind it, maybe some of the mechanics and all that good stuff.
Yeah, sure thing. So the design work began on it a few years ago when I was house sitting for my older brother, who was going on his honeymoon. And, I was hanging out with his dog, and it was just me and the dog in the house for a week. And I just started playing around with some ideas. Really, the inspiration for the mechanics of the game was that I was just thinking hard about action selection systems generally. And in particular, like, why is worker placement such a robust action selection system? And, I just thought on that for a while, and a few things became clear. It's like when you're selecting your actions in a worker placement game, you're cutting off future players from picking what you've picked. That's a pretty common pattern in worker placement. And also you've got this kind of rhythm in worker placement where at the start, there's a lot of options, and then as more workers get placed on the board, it kind of narrows down. So with that in hand, understanding some of what I thought were the crucial aspects of worker placement, I just set out to twist it up in a way that I thought would retain some of what was interesting about it while giving it, some unique character. And to me, this idea of workers moving around the board, not being picked up and placed down, but just simply moving around in some cyclical kind of way seemed interesting to me. And
Agreed.
yeah, and so and as you say, I mean, with Space Park, when you take an action, you're moving that rocket around to the next location, and so it fulfills a similar function as like placing a worker on the board and blocking your opponent from taking it. Because obviously, when you take an action in Space Park, the next player after you won't be able to take that action under normal circumstances.
Yep, exactly. And what's really cool about it too, sorry, totally interjecting, is the game keeps moving. Every turn is going to be different of what's available to you, just like a worker placement game. But in this game, there's no rounds involved. It's like just going to keep going as the board unfolds, and as players choose things, different things are going to be available on your turn.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing I wanted to do with the design is to make the decision space be somewhat small, but very interesting and have a lot of just implications for the future state of the board. So here, just what I mean by that is that normally in Space Park, if you don't have any fast pass tokens or ways to manipulate the rockets, you have only 3 options, more or less, on your turn. And to me, that was interesting of like, can you create a rich game where people are only choosing from a few different things each turn? And that was a bit different from like worker placement, where the first player to place on the board might have 12 or 16 options, or who knows how many.
Yeah, totally, man. I think that's the cool part about this, is that you've really refined those 7 destinations or actions that you're going to be doing the whole game. But I think that the game, a lot of people are asking, okay, this looks awesome. Where does the tension come in? And it really comes in that engine that you're building, so that if you're getting fast travel tickets, you're going to be able to manipulate the board for your own benefit or to block out others from things. And you're really building this engine through the badges that you're getting at Starlight Station, so that you can have the best turns or be most efficient in the game, which is what I love about it. And towards the end, you have this really big tension of the finish of like, okay, I'm going to try to hit this, and I don't want anybody else to be able to jump me at the end, so that when I'm ending the game, that I'm going to be the winner. And it's really that testing of that engine that you've built along the way to handle all that action, movement, and selections available, so that you're becoming the most efficient explorer in that.
Well put.
Yeah, sorry. I'm totally just jumping in and interjecting here. But
I appreciate it.
So that was we can jump into more of those ideas there. So like even this idea of worker placement, which is what we're landing on first, but it's more of this action selection mechanism in the game. And I think that even, down to the way we developed out the game. So when Henry brought us this game, it was a great game, but a lot of it, like the tickets themselves, didn't have any abilities on them. It was actually originally under the name Pirate Land, which is a really fun pirate amusement park idea, which we love. But at the same time, it didn't feel like pirates weren't fighting. There were certain elements where like, what if we explored some other ideas in this and see if something fit better? And so Henry's been a part of this process the whole way, and we ultimately landed on Space Park. But again, like the ideas behind that. So with worker placement, you're placing guys onto different areas, whereas this, we didn't want to have a worker, because one of the biggest hang-ups that people might have when they first start the game is this idea that like you don't have a rocket. The rocket's not yours. Like, the rockets are available to everyone on their turn. So when it's my turn, I'm choosing one of those 3 rockets to go to, instead of being like, where's my rocket and where is it moving around the board? It's just like, here are the 3 rockets that are, community use, which is really great, because the game is going to scale depending on that. You don't have to have extra components or pieces. It's just those 3 rockets. And we felt like that idea of transportation or visiting someplace would be a more helpful UI, user experience thing, to help people not pigeonhole the rocket into being like, which one's mine? Or the worker especially is like, oh, this person's my person. It's like, no, that's not how. You should never own a person, but in general. But yeah, so that's that was a fun way that we were trying to figure out, okay, how can this mechanic that Henry's got a cool idea on, how can it explore itself in the realm of physical components and design behind it? So let's get into more about development and along the way and like kind of what came out. So like the game, what would you say changed about the game in your mind as it was developed out with us? Like what were some of the things we were looking into but still keeping the heart of the game there the same?
Sure. So just as a very minor correction to what you said is just that the original Pirate Land tickets did have effects on them.
Correct.
They
had like gain a pass or gain a what was it? A crystal.
You just either are gaining the captain's favorite, which is now gaining the Scouter to have the assistance of Scout the Robot, and gaining what are now called Fast Pass tokens. But regardless,
Yep.
I mean, really, the game was at it was in a very tactical place at that point. The card effects were mostly focused on near-term benefits, short-term rewards. So you'd have the assistance of what is now Scout for the time being, but that could be taken away from you quickly. Anyways, you didn't have any sense of like you're building a real engine to this game. And I think to me that's the main arc that this game went on throughout development, was taking it from being a very puzzly, tactical, light strategy game, which was solid, but just was heavily in the tactical realm. And then
it became much more like it was more chess, I would say, back then. It was this idea of like, how can I be most efficient with my moves? And I have some ways to manipulate the board and to get those, tickets at the right time or turn them in at the right time to swing it in your favor. But yeah, like you're saying, it's like that tactical idea of like, as you're moving around, it was way more chess, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, there was just not a lot of room for long-term planning. Mostly what you were doing was trying to block maybe your immediate neighbor from doing something, and then kind of just, as you say, making the most efficient use out of your turns as possible. But really, when we started working together and developing the game, I think it became clear pretty early on that we wanted to kind of open up a whole strategic space in terms of like the long-term game plans that you can set up for yourself, and giving yourself a real kind of replayability to the game where you can attempt different strategies each time and try to build more and more efficient engines or whatever it is that you're aspiring to do within the game.
Yeah, man, for sure. And I think that was just from, hopefully any game designers listen to this, that's the perspective that we want to have, is like, we loved your game and the core of the game was so good, and it's like we want to keep that intact, but what are ways that we can explore replayability or adding different nuances to strategy every game, or having games that are shaped totally different depending on what tickets are out that game. And so that was like one of the main ways that we wanted to dive in there and just see what we could do. So thanks for letting us change your baby in some ways. I know that game, as a designer, you feel very close to this thing, but you've been awesome in the midst of it, man, and just totally helpful. And Henry came up with all those abilities that are on the cards currently. Like he's lived Space Park and has the algorithm built of like what a turn equals and all that good stuff. And so like please hear this as like not us trying to toot our horn, but just in more ways that Henry has been super awesome and super gracious to take these ideas that we're pitching to him and kind of reshape some of the things in the game with it.
Well, thanks for saying all that. That's very generous of you. Basically, one lesson that I've learned throughout this whole process is just to open yourself up a little bit to collaboration. That's a lesson that I personally learned, because I think many new designers coming in, first time working with a publisher, there will be some reluctance to let go of what you've already got. But to me, this process has taught me that if you team up with the right people, actually the whole project can get elevated by collaboration. And I think that's where Space Park is at now, is it's the best version of what it's ever been. And I don't think it would have arrived at this place without teamwork, so to speak. So I'm appreciative of the whole collaborative process that we've gone on in this developing Space Park. It's been a lot of fun.
Agreed, man. It's been a blast. I have so much fun working with you and pitching ideas. And that's also to say that a lot of the stuff that we threw out there didn't make it into the game. We totally tried it, and it was just, this isn't working right. It's not executing the goal. And so, yeah, man, I appreciate you a ton. I don't have too much stuff else. What's your favorite badge? How about we'll end with that question.
Ooh, well, I'm not that great with the badge names just because they've changed around recently, but I like the badges that open up possibilities at destinations that are otherwise somewhat basic. So things that allow you to, say, go to Fusion Falls and trade in for additional resources there, or things that give you bonuses at the destinations that would otherwise just be giving you a crystal. Things like that, where it's augmenting the destinations that are already there. So when you start the game, you've got these very simple destinations that anybody can understand what they do. And then once you start getting some badges, it's like the destinations get a bit more nuanced, and also they become differentiated from player to player. So what it means for me to go to Fusion Falls becomes different than what it is for you to go there. And to me, that asymmetry that is emergent from the badge engine building kind of process is quite interesting. So I like those.
Yeah, man, that's one of the things that I seriously love about the game is like it's super simple. A lot of people are like, wait, that's it at first? But then it kind of totally emerges as you're playing it, those nuanced strategies of how you can make it work more and more to your favor. And that's great for like first-time gamers. Other games, including my own that I've made, sometimes require like you to understand the nuances of the cards in order to form a good strategy your first game, whereas this one's like, here are the current actions and the game unfolds as you play it in a very nice way where it's like I understand this and I feel like I have good strategies even the first time I play it through. I'm making informed decisions on what I want to build as my engine as it's coming out at Starlight Station in these unique places with the augmented actions to take. And so, yeah, man. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Henry. I appreciate your time and talking to us about Space Park and your background. And is there anything else you'd want to leave anybody with?
No additional thoughts. This has been great. Yeah, thanks for chatting with me. And yeah, as always, it's a pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much. All right, guys. Thanks so much for checking this out, checking behind the scenes on the designer part of Space Park. If you have any more questions, leave them in the comments below. We'll work on getting to those and answer them. And if you want us to do more of these or ask Henry and do another one of these where we do kind of an FAQ with Henry, I think that would be really fun. Henry's got other games in the works that we've been are excited about. And so, yeah, guys, thank you so much. Wish you guys the best, and we'll see you later.